Hello, people, and thank you for joining me and my friends on the Game Files podcast. My name is Matthew, and I will be hosting discussions on all things dice throwing, button mashing, page turning, and screen viewing, from the past, present, and future of those things that occupy our spare time. And today I'm joined by Radis.
Hello, hello.
And Mad Marty.
Good to see you guys.
And today we are going to be talking about our general introductions into comic books. I got some comic books when I was a little kid. It was all Marvel ones. I had no idea what it was. They're all worth a ton of money. I got them for a birthday present when I was about 6 years old. I cut them all up because that's what you do when you're 6. Going forward in life, I realized that a lot of them were key moments back from like 86, 87 during a lot of interesting things going on in comic book history. Later on, I got back into it, and I'm sure some of the influences are similar, but when the X-Men cartoon came out in the early 90s. That's when I got back into comics, and I never looked back. To this day, I still hit the comic shop, look at some stuff. I don't necessarily buy as much as I used to, but it is definitely a part of my life, and I like to keep up on the storylines. So what do you got, Radis?
Yeah, I was probably the same way. As a younger kid, I always knew comics were out there, but I spent more money when I was younger on cards until probably about the same early 90s when X-Men cartoon was on there. I didn't jump into X-Men originally. I was more into like Image, more of the little grittier comics, the Grifter, the Gen 13 when it first came out. And I spent money on it. I still spent a whole lot of money. I was that infamous kid that go down to the comic book shop and read 3 or 4 comics and then buy one and then ride back home.
Oh, yeah.
So, again, same thing here. Like, there was a period in time where my pull file here at the fantasy shop was like $30 or $40 a week and 2 times out of the month. And I'm like, just trying to store those is a logistical nightmare. Because now, being my age now, it's like, okay, it's not a comic book I'm going to read and just like kind of pitch into a box. No, it's got sleeves and all that. So, don't buy as many now, but I'm the same way. I kind of get online every once in a while, see what's going on, try to stay caught up.
Cool.
Jeffrey,
what you got? Marty? What you got, Mad Marty?
Well, me being unlike you two, I was the little brother in the equation. So it was my older brother that was really into the comics growing up. I remember the first real brush that we had with comics. We were in a camping trip out in Iowa, and something to do while we're sitting in the tent. My parents stopped at some convenience store. My brother picked up a whole bunch of comics, including Wolverine #1 during his first original. Wolverine had a limited 4-issue limited series, I believe, and then he had a regular monthly series that came after that, which became the mainstream Wolverine comics that we've known since. I haven't kept up recently, but he actually had the first issue of that main series, Wolverine #1, and he also had Punisher War Journal #1, a couple other DC comics at the time. Me being the little brother, and you have to understand, I was not even 10 years old yet. I didn't have a ton of interest, like actually reading it, but I loved to kind of flip through it, I was one of those just look at the picture types for many years, and this was around the time that we got into comics. It was right after the Fall of the Mutant storyline back in the mid-'80s, right before Inferno, because Inferno was the first real crossover that we got into, and then the years pass on, Infinity Gauntlet, and then the '90s cartoon that you talked about. We'll talk more on the subject later, but that's kind of how I got into it. Just a random camping trip was my first introduction to comics before the age of 10, and it was just more my brother's gig more than my own. So that's probably what I can say about that.
Yeah, and it's funny that you were talking about the Wolverine #1 and all that. The first comic book that I personally ever bought was Wolverine, I believe 66 or 67. It's got the at this point it's like the stereotypical Wolverine pose on it. There's been posters of it and all kinds of different things, but yeah, definitely pretty brutal character. And speaking of characters, right now, comics are very popular in pop culture, for sure, and with all the movies coming out and Disney basically getting the rights for everything, which, hey, God bless them. Hopefully they keep doing a decent job. on all the other stuff that they've acquired. But as far as the characters go, there's the ones that we've seen on screen, and there's a lot, way more that we've never seen on screen. So I was just kind of wondering, as far as your guys' favorite characters, like what are we looking at? I mean, it doesn't matter, Marvel, DC, Image, variant, whatever, doesn't matter. We'll go ahead and start with you, Radis. Who are you looking at? Who are some of your favorite characters, and why?
And I know this is one that you don't like, but Spider-Man's always going to be one of my top favorite ones. I'm finally glad that they're actually beginning to do decent stuff with him on the screen.
I'm going to give
Tobey Maguire's first movie was okay, but that went downhill real quick in that series.
I'm going to give you this. Into the Spider-Verse was decent. I actually really enjoyed that movie.
Yeah, that movie was fantastic. But again, showing Disney taking over and really curating the stories that they're picking, and really keeping a handle on the production costs and production crew and all of that. Yeah, there's a lot of old characters. Like, there's a character in Image called Grifter, and I think he's in Wildstorm now. I don't remember where he is now, but he is kind of the Deadpool / meets Wolverine, but without really any great super abilities from Image. I think would have been a great character to bring to. I think he'd probably fit more on a small screen, but I think he's so dead in the water now in current comics. I don't think they'd ever bring him about. But like I said, I got a lot into those offshoots. Like I mentioned already, but like the Jim Lee's Gen 13, his first comic books away from Marvel and all of that was fantastic. I think I've got the first 20 or 30 issues of those in pristine condition. It was just a well-told story. Now, of course, it falls into that typical comic where it's an all-female lead. So yeah, these are not your averagely shaped women that are on here. So it got a lot of bad publicity for that. But if you get past that, just look at the story and the character and the humanity of those characters. And that's really what I look for in the comics. That's why I love the Flash. He's the same guy. He's super fast and fastest man on the planet, but he overcomes this sense of inadequacy with snarky quips and all that. You can always that air of he doesn't think he's good enough just behind him, but yet he can do all this stuff and is considered one of the most powerful characters in the DC universe.
Yeah.
Later in the series, more recently, he's gotten a little more confident because he's had to, because he's kind of screwed up the entire DC timeline
over and over again.
With, Flashpoint and just various other things he's done. Those are the kind of characters I graduate like.
What about you, Mad Marty?
Are you talking about just favorite comic book characters as a whole? Are you talking in certain medium? What are you thinking?
I mean, honestly, it can be anything at this point, because all the different things that originated out of comics, can lead to what we like. Because I think I know where you're going to go with this, but it can be cartoons, it can be movies. I mean, just anything that originated in a comic book and or found its way onto a comic book, because there's a few characters like that.
Well, when we're talking about comic books, it's a little bit trickier for me because, like everything else in my life, it seems to be like a generational thing. There was stuff that I liked when I first was exposed to it, and then as time went on, as I got older, those tastes kind of changed a little bit. But overall, if you had to really, it's kind of funny. Like when I was first into comics, it was all Marvel or nothing. I had very little interest in DC. And even after, the DC animated universe started to take off, I was still mostly pro-Marvel when it got down to it. When it got down to Batman the Animated Series versus Marvel's X-Men, I still preferred Marvel's X-Men at that time. Where I think it kind of shifted was when we got to the Batman No Man's Land story arc, which gave me a real good showcase of the Bat villains. And if you look at a more global, big picture kind of, favorite, I have to say Kevin Conroy's Batman really sold it for me in the end. And, whenever I pick up a Batman comic book, that's the voice I hear in my head.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's kind of been that way ever since. You throw in Batman Beyond and JLU, it's by far one of the best fleshed out characters I've ever had in my entire, comic book experience.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of continuity problems like you'll see with other retcons and stuff going out there in this day and age.
Yeah, and I've actually read some things about DC and what they've done with that, where they've tried to, like, that's one comic they've tried to keep going continuously despite the fact that they reset it like every 5 years.
Right.
Cool. So for me personally, I mean, and you guys have heard me talk about this quite a few times, but my journey for comic books is similar to Marty's, where it was primarily Marvel in the beginning. I dabbled in DC, Death of Superman, Batman getting his back broken, those kinds of things, where I'm like, wow, this is really cool. Like I thought the storylines were excellent, but I always kind of radiated towards the Marvel side of the equation. And again, like I said, dabbling in a few others. But so like favorite characters, I mean, I originally my favorite character was Archangel. I thought he was pretty cool. Just, the idea that, he was in a sense of he was Angel, obviously, for those who don't know, and he got lost his wings, and then Apocalypse basically altered his genetics, gave him metal wings or bioorganic steel wings or whatever it was, and he was the Apocalypse death one of the Four Horsemen death for a while, and then he basically was redeemed, but he continued to have those abilities, and it was kind of neat. So I like the idea that he was a redeemed character. Later on in life, things changed. I became a bigger fan of like the old school, like Captain America. I love the fact that he was a good guy. He's always a good guy, and even though they've kind of messed with that more recently, that's one of the things I appreciated about him.
Hydra.
Yeah, exactly. Let's make him always part of Hydra, which makes all the sense.
Radis knows how I feel about Hydra, but we'll talk about that later.
But no, so Captain America is definitely up there in my top 3. Another character I've always liked was Colossus. Again, it's kind of that thing where he's almost, up until recently with some of those storylines, he's really just a good guy. Like he fights for what is right all the time, even if it's not good. And he's made decisions that have altered the X-Men landscape positive ways, self-sacrifice and all of that. But when it comes down to my favorite character, and a lot of people think it's weird, whatever, but it's Nightcrawler of the X-Men or Excalibur or whatever team he's on at the time. I love the fact that he looks like a demon, but he loves Jesus, and I think that's kind of neat. Where it's like that, the two sides of that coin, where everybody, they look at him, they think he's evil right out of the gate, but he actually is one of the most, I guess you could say, gentle souls in the entire comic industry. Yet when things go down, he's a skilled fighter, and there's been different renditions of him that have been awesome. But it's if you can't tell, I tend to go more to the pure of heart characters, because that's just the way I am, because I like those stories. So
side note on your commentary on Colossus there, really quick. Every time I see Colossus on panel, heck, last week I was playing it. Colossus stage theme song, Children of the Atom X-Men.
There's that, and then in the arcade, the X-Men arcade game, where it's his when he uses special ability, the like that sound cracks me up.
Yeah. The 6-player game. Yeah.
Oh yeah. It's terrible. Once in a while, my friend Seth
play Colossus in that one.
Yeah, once in a while, my friend Seth sends me like a sound clip of that just out of nowhere, and it just makes me laugh, because we used to talk about that. But yeah, again, those are some characters that stick out to me all the time. I mean, there are other characters in other comic companies that I really like, but like those are the ones that kind of just really radiate with me. Just because, I mean, again, that's kind of the way I am. I like more pure characters that are just pure heroes. I don't need all the nitty gritty dark stuff. I can enjoy it, but it's not my favorite thing.
Right.
So, we're kind of talking about our favorite, largely we were talking about our favorite heroes, anti-heroes, those kinds of things. So here comes the next question. Villains.
Oh, I thought you were going about your least favorite character.
Well, we could, okay, we'll do that first. I'll
That way
let
I can just.
I'll
That
let
way
you
we just
guys.
get all the people that are going to shut off the podcast whenever these are mentioned. Can just do it now and not slog. For
It's
another 10 minutes
okay.
before they realize they hate us.
You mean popular character that we dislike?
It doesn't have to be popular, but just like
No, just
characters.
your least favorite.
Yeah, least. I mean, we could talk about a couple, but like, I'm not going to start. I'm going to end this one. Raidus, what do you got?
Why don't you get started on this one, Raidus? So I'm going to have a hard time with this.
Oh, this is easy. There's only one comic book character that I refuse to buy, read. I've never liked the character, and I think he's just a fundamental flaw in the writing, and that is Superman.
Oh,
I don't. Yeah.
Oh my gosh! How dare you say that?
I don't. Yeah, I'm sorry. You have a character who is immune to everything, so to put him in perilous, let's give every Joe, Steve, and Bob that's robbing a bank kryptonite. So I don't know.
Yeah,
they keep giving. They make him so powerful, where it's like, okay, why do you have a Justice League? Well, I will throw the Justice League movie currently out in there. The entire league is getting their butt whooped until Superman shows up. So you have this ultimate character that can defeat pretty much anyone that's on Earth. Why do you have a Justice League? You should just have Superman, which therefore makes me not want to read when the man can just beat anyone pretty quickly. And to put him in a situation to make it believable that he's losing isn't believable with the lore you have built around him. So,
well, just remember, he is susceptible to magic. I'm just throwing that out there.
Yeah, I understand that, but it still doesn't matter. It seems like then all of a sudden, let's just go and let's do some magic at him as I'm robbing this bank because I'm poor and destitute and hate the government. Oh, everybody's like that in that comic book world. Or you have to be fighting Darkseid and all the, which is fine. I don't mind when they do that, but it's like, again, if Superman's losing, no one else in that comic book is going to stand a chance against that villain. So why have any other superheroes in that comic book?
That's fun. So for the half of our viewers,
you can turn off now.
Our listeners, for the half of our listeners, it was nice knowing you. But we will continue this conversation for the other half.
Don't worry, man. I'll wipe out the rest of
I'm gonna wipe them out too. It's gonna be great.
Okay.
So
a thought just came to my head because for like the last 45 seconds we're listening to Rago.
You're gonna say Deadpool or Batman.
Well, I'm sitting here.
He says Batman, I'll laugh. I hate Batman.
Nah, it's because I was sitting there trying to think of what's the character that I really don't like. What's the character I really don't like? And it just came to me. Actually, this isn't probably within the last 10 years. I am not a big Iron Man fan at this point. Ever since Civil War, I have not been
comic book Civil War, correct?
Both.
Okay, copy.
Because it's kind of the same premise.
Yeah.
Iron Man feels guilty about some kind of conversation that he has a conversation with a bystander that makes him feel so guilty that he had to create an event that reshaped the entire Marvel Universe, the Superhuman Registration Act. And this was just over a simple guilty conscience from a single conversation. On the movie end, for those that watch Civil War, which I am definitely not a fan of, it was like I love the Civil War story arc in the comics, but I hated it in the movies because it felt so watered down in the grand scheme of things that it just never really did it justice. But my thought is, okay, you have such a big problem with superheroes, we'll just go ahead and let Crossbones do his terrorist Dirty Bob next time, and then you don't have to worry about the superheroes anymore. It really just didn't work for me as a good justification for the story arc. And, Iron Man's been kind of a wuss in my head ever since.
Well, and to go along with that, I'm going to throw out a quick spoilers type thing for those who might want to read or watch or whatever if you haven't watched the movies or read the comics, because the Civil War event was actually kind of interesting in my opinion. The way it started, again, I agree with you, it was not great, but I'm going to agree with you on the Tony Stark thing or the Iron Man thing, is that almost every bad thing that happened, besides in the comics anyways, besides the event that spurred it, every bad thing is a result of his decisions. And he never once takes responsibility for it until Captain America's dead. And even then, he still just moves on with his plan. And it's like, dude, you are not a good guy. You know, like to the point where he sent out the Thor clone, which killed Goliath, which was a big death in that storyline, and all these decisions that he just kept making over and over and over again, and even the death of Captain America was a direct result of his actions. So I agree with you. Like sending was it the Dark Avengers? He said, I can't remember. He sent out the one team where he released them all, and they created havoc. Just so it was just bad. Tony Stark. Yeah, Tony Stark is a bad guy.
There was some kind of like a what if story arc that I heard about. I've read about it. I think it was on Wiki at one point that he actually saw what could have been with a couple of different choices. Like had he actually worked with Captain America when it came to a crucial point where, he basically forced Captain America to choose a side. And if he actually chose to work with him, they actually got to form a better world. And he supposedly wept at the end of that storyline. I've never actually read the comic. But yeah, to your point, I mean, out of all the superheroes, and I got tons of them in my head that I'm just not interested in. Like the Fantastic Four. It's like, oh yeah, okay, not whatever.
Yeah, but you don't hate them.
Yeah,
they're just not interesting.
There's a difference between picking up a comic, flipping through, and going, that's okay. Or you go, that is not even a comic I'm going to even pick up. It's like I'm just going to walk right by the shelf.
Well, I just know if I was a member of the X-Men or even an Avenger or something like that, and I'm sitting here doing my thing, trying to make the world a better place, then all of a sudden, bam, Tony's, Iron Man / Tony Stark, I don't know if I know his secret identity or not, comes out. Well, actually, by then I guess he would, because he's sitting here pushing for public registration.
Yeah.
But I'd be like, screw this guy.
Yeah. Oh, you want my entire family in danger now? Congratulations.
It's like, oh, you get to call the shots now? And that's just my overall thought with the whole. I think it was healthy for the Marvel Universe to have Civil War.
Yeah.
I thought it was a great story arc. And, it's not even really so much, I'm not criticizing the writers on it. I just don't like the character Iron Man anymore because of that very fact. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, that's actually that's a good one. There's a kind of a couple of them for me, which one of them, based on some of the articles I've read, I think is universally hated. And I'll start with that one first. Is Cyclops, what they did with him in the comics, basically turning him into a bad guy. He ends up killing, again, lots of spoilers, ends up killing Xavier at a certain point, and I think what they intended to do, what the comics originally did, and they may have switched some writers along the way, which kind of makes things interesting. But I think what they intended to do was have him go through like a tough spot, go through a bad journey, and then come out on the other end like a better leader, a little bit more edgy character, because he was kind of always the Boy Scout. But what they really did was make him universally hated. After you kill your father, who is doing nothing but trying to help you, how does that make you okay ever? Sorry, you're irredeemable to me. I mean, sorry.
I'm just gonna toss this out there, Matthew.
Yeah.
And I'm not giving you grief at all, but you hated Cyclops even before that.
I didn't like him, which is funny because normally you'd think I'd like him because he's like the Boy Scout. He's like, I'm gonna do this thing, but I just
but he's not a good Boy Scout.
No, he's not.
He's the Boy Scout that sends them back. That's quoting the rules and regulations, and while he's doing that, the old lady gets hit by a car.
Yeah, pretty much. But
it's like, okay, that's great,
but as far as mainstream characters, and Ray just kind of alluded to this earlier, but Spider-Man, not a big fan of Spider-Man. Now there have been instances where I've appreciated some of the things, like this again. We're talking about the cartoons, the Spider-Man cartoon that was part of my daily viewing. I enjoyed it. It was a comic book thing, and it was one of the only ones on TV at the time. So I thought that was pretty cool. But as far as the comic books and everything, and I tried to get into Spider-Man, partially because of you, Radis, and because he's your one of your favorite guys, and I'm like, yeah, he can't be that bad. If Radis likes him, I gotta, he can't be that bad.
And storylines are tough to get into.
Yeah,
I'll give you that.
But you look at and I even did the research on it and all that, and I'm like, well, this guy, he creates all of his own villains. Like almost every villain he has, he had a hand in creating. And then he's like, I can't be I mean, I'm not saying every character needs to be the Punisher, but come on now. At a certain point, like when the city gets half destroyed 10 or 12 times, killing the half the population, you need to take responsibility for what you did and put that dude down. I'm just saying.
But yet you have no problem with Batman.
I didn't say I liked Batman that much.
They had an episode to address that in terms of whether or not he was responsible for the creation of his villains. That question is settled. It's called Trial. Batman animated series, great episode.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Well, no, the thing about Batman, I didn't say I love him or anything. I said, like his villains are some of the better villains in my opinion because his rogues gallery is really interesting.
Yeah.
But no, I didn't say I was like saying Batman.
What I'm talking about is the not putting him down. How many lives would be saved if Batman had just killed Joker the first time?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with you. Not disagreeing with you at all. Not at all.
Yeah. So a 16-year-old child who chooses to do the same thing that a 45-year-old vigilante does.
Yeah, dude, but by the time I started collecting it, he's not 16 anymore.
No, I know, but that's always been his code, just like Batman's from the very start.
Sure. And again, I'm not disagreeing.
Real quick,
Batman should put the Joker down too. Just say, or he shouldn't go to Arkham. He should be executed. Come on now.
Oh yeah, the state should have put him down, not just Batman.
Like, I can't believe he got out for the 30th time. How does he keep getting out?
I think they lifted the death penalty in that state.
Oh, whatever.
Anyways, going back, I don't mean to backtrack really quick, but I just got to backtrack real quick, guys.
Sure.
Going back to Cyclops, it's a good thing that you didn't get into comics until the X-Men cartoon. Because if you thought you hated Cyclops before, knowing what I know about you now and how you feel about family, back in the mid '80s with the whole Madeline Pryor thing and the whole
kept
X
going
Factor,
though. It didn't stop there. So
well, hear me out.
Yeah.
This is a guy that actually left his wife and kid to be with Jean Grey.
Yeah.
Actually, the way that comics were written back then, it was a lot because I actually picked up like a reprint issue of the Inferno Saga.
Yeah.
And kind of reading some of the stuff in there, here we have somebody that completely abandoned his wife, and at this point, all the villainy for Madeline Pryor hadn't even been written yet. I looked back into the conception of the comic. She wasn't meant to be a clone originally. She actually was just a person that looked a lot like Jean Grey, and that was going to be it. And Cyclops was going to retire. But then they went ahead, and since they pulled the X Factor team together, they had to find a way to write off Madeline Pryor. And they did so many things to Cyclops back in those days that he actually is kind of a jerk in the grand scheme of things. But what makes things even more twisted is while the X-Men were kind of doing their Australia-based thing and everything, Madeline Pryor winds up hooking up with his brother Havoc.
There's a whole comic series based like basically a what if on that too. The Mutant X series, which was pretty. I actually like that series.
But yeah, I mean, knowing what I know about how you feel about family responsibility.
Oh yeah, he's a D. It's fine.
But anyways,
well, it carried over because he was shacking up with Emma Frost, and I mean, there's love triangles and all kinds of stuff. So that guy, no, I mean, again,
I forgot about that one too.
Again, I don't like the guy, so I mean, you're not making me like him by telling me he's more of a jerk.
No, it's just kind of funny because he is supposed to be the Boy Scout character.
Yeah,
but
he's terrible.
But he does everything. I can actually buy Superman on most days because, I haven't really read into his histories that closely, but he just doesn't seem to be engaging in. Because let's see, there's Emma Frost, Psylocke.
Was he with Psylocke too?
Oh yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
Pretty much, if you were female and put an X suit on,
and had like telepathy.
Yeah. Yep.
He undressed them with their mind.
Yep. Now I'll give you that. Superman was at least a decent after the Silver Age or the early stuff, but then the more modern version of what most people nowadays know Superman. He is, the All-American, the Boy Scout, and all of that for the most part. So I'll give him that, and just have a set of morals that he follows, which we can get into a movie faux pas on that at a different time.
Sure.
But like I said.
Well, one thing that we were kind of getting into, and I want to kind of shift the conversation in the back into this direction, but Ray, you kind of mentioned the strength of villains. And Spider-Man does have a very good rogues gallery that kind of ups the ante in terms of interest. Obviously, the X-Men have a good rogues gallery. And, that's what really made Batman so attractive to me was the rogues gallery.
Yeah.
It's the villains that, tell you so much more about the heroes themselves that really make the storylines in the grand scheme of things. And I just thought that overall, Marvel did a better job with villain development as opposed to anything but Batman in DC for the longest time. I mean, back in 1998, if you tell me the name of Batman villains, I could probably name 20. And then you tell me the name of a Superman villain, it'd probably be 3.
Yeah, just it's the big ones.
Yeah, or if you tell me to name a Green Lantern villain, what?
2.
Yeah. I mean, heck, I don't even think I would have gotten Sinestro back then. So,
yeah.
But that's, in terms of villains, I mean, how do you guys generally feel about, what are some of your favorite villains or motivations that you've seen over the years in comics?
Well, you hit it. I mean, say the Joker is, in my mind, is my favorite villain. If there's the kind of comic that he's in, and I've either bought it, read it, or I'm going to do one of both.
What's your favorite Joker? What's your favorite Joker story plot?
I've got one, but you go ahead.
Killing Joke is probably still, and it's one of words and all that, and people just love it. That is probably up there. I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite, but I don't know if I could actually just come out and pick a favorite. I haven't, like, the newer stuff after he cuts his face off, and I didn't get into that period where he cut his face off and he like dies and comes back, and there's like a couple different Jokers. I didn't get into that. I do want to get into the new one now that he's got a new girlfriend, Punchline. I want to see what they're doing with him now. But yeah, I guess out of him, just Killing Joke, or the Joker storyline that led up to. I'm trying to remember if that was actually in a comic or if that's in one of the DC animated, the Joker storyline where he manipulates Superman into killing Lois Lane.
Oh, the Injustice storyline.
Yeah, it's the Injustice video game.
There's comic books for it.
Okay, yeah.
I don't know if they came before the game or after, but yeah, there are comics. There's a series for it.
Just that story arc I love too. Just the fact that it's like, okay, he broke him. Yeah, he breaks the Man of Steel. Again, the man I just complained about having no weaknesses. Now you have a villain that steps up and goes, okay, here's your one weakness, and uses it against him perfectly.
Yeah.
So
that's actually a good one. To go along with that, the Joker's storyline for me that I love, he's just the lead up to it, was the Bat Metal story with the Joker who laughs. That is ridiculous, dude. Like that.
Yeah.
Again, the Joker, or not the Joker, the Batman who laughs isn't the Joker, but the lead up to it is all Joker, and it's awesome. Yep. The idea that Batman gets infected with the Joker toxin, he does not win. It's like a different reality, but the Batman who laughs is ridiculous. And now there's another series coming out. It's called it's a DC Death Metal or something like that. It's going to start pretty soon.
Yeah, makes it say, you can see.
Yeah, there it is. Yep.
Got that on. I've got the metal.
It's a good storyline, actually.
It's a fantastic story.
Yeah, but as far as villains go, for me personally, it might sound funny, but I'm kind of a big Apocalypse fan. The movie did not do him justice at all. I mean, again, I had biases going in because to me, the voice of Apocalypse in the animated cartoon that's what I hear when I read the comics. But there's been so many good storylines with him at the center of it, and every time he comes around and creates a new Four Horsemen team and does his thing, I can't help but get drawn back into it. I might not buy all the comics, but I definitely read up on it and do all of that, because just the choices he's made on those characters since he first came about is just amazing. Where it's like, at one time, we talked about Archangel being the Horseman Death, and then later on Wolverine becomes, I believe it was the Horseman of Death, which was a ridiculous storyline that I really enjoyed. Gambit at one time, well, actually it was like Gambit, Rogue, or no, Gambit.
No, it's Polaris.
Polaris, that's right.
Polaris.
But yeah, just basically pulling in different characters and whether it was brainwashing them or in Gambit's case, he actually joined willingly. Like it's just crazy. Like some of the things they can do. And then to go along with that, I mean, even to this day, I still have a copy of the first appearance of the official first appearance of Apocalypse, which is kind of just a shadow of him. And I believe it was X Factor number 4. And then I've got the follow up with that, which is where he's full fledged coming out, and that's X Factor number 5. Still have those comics. They're good comics. Even when he first came out, you're like, who is this guy? This is insane. So yeah, love that villain. I mean, I don't agree with him. I just think it's neat what he does in the comic books. Marty, did you talk about villains at all? You talk about like kind of generalities. Like, do you have some favorites?
Well, in terms of villains, it's really tough for me to say who my favorite is over the years. If you put a gun in my head, I would still say Mr. Sinister. I've always liked his savviness. You know, he's not like he doesn't have like a huge ego problem. He doesn't like have something really to prove to the other heroes. You know, he's working his plans. He's the ultimate character that plays the long game. You know, a lot of Sinister's story arcs will go on for, 3-4 years before his plans come into fruition. You know, and even like Apocalypse is there and he shows up and he wants to knock everything down right away. But I've always kind of liked the villain that plays the long game, and I think Sinister does a masterful job of that. And he's just not so in your face like the Joker or similar kind of villains. So, and plus, I know if I was a comic book villain, I'd probably be more like Mr. Sinister in the end. And that, I mean, because after that, my favorite villain is probably Two-Face from the Batman series. Yeah. But he's kind of vanilla by comparison. So again, when it gets down to it, Sinister's probably my favorite. You know, he's obviously my favorite X-villain and probably my favorite villain in comics. Yeah, I'd say that's a good choice. And your birthday present this year was definitely fantastic. I don't care. I don't care if you liked it or not. I liked giving it to you. I'll be wearing it in my next YouTube video. I'll be wearing it in my next YouTube video. I promise. Nice. So we've talked about heroes. We talked about villains. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go on between the two: the interactions, the storylines, crossover events, and all kinds of other fun things. As far as storylines go in comics, what are your guys' favorite? Like, I would narrow it down to one because we could talk about this forever because there's so many great storylines. But if you could say one, either your favorite or one of your favorite comic book storylines, what would it be? I'd like for you guys to go first with this one, actually. That's fine. Radis, you want to go?
Yeah, sure. You probably already know the answer to this one because it's the one that I have owned 2 copies of everything, just like Matthew has, with the Age of Apocalypse crossover for Marvel.
Oh, you stole mine.
X-Men. Yeah. Come on. It was the only crossover series, just any story series, where I have bought every issue.
Yeah, same.
There have been other ones. There have been other story arcs like which I enjoyed just as much, maybe even a little bit better, but Age of Apocalypse was the one that I bought every comic, where I hunted them down, made sure I had a copy of every single one. I still have a complete collection of it. It was just so, you took every character in there and you turned them on their head. So characters that you would expect to do something may do something completely different, which now I have said they completely, I don't even know why I didn't bring the link up earlier, but then you have, they have these minor characters in there that are minor characters in the main arc, and some of them are even gone in the main reality that Age of Apocalypse brings back and spawns off like 3 other series and a couple of villains, and it just does such a great job. And it is so different from any, with maybe the exception of, House of M, where Scarlet Witch rewrites all of the reality. Yeah. Yeah, those are about the only 2 that it's like, okay, it isn't a world-changing story arc. No, it's something happens, and now everything is completely and utterly different from that point forward. Yeah. So it's like, okay, you didn't need to know what happened 6 issues before you buy that first Age of Apocalypse and maybe Legion Quest just to know what happened to Spawn it.
X-Men Alpha, right? Was the first one? Because
Yeah, it was the two openings.
It was Legion Quest before, and then I think X-Men Alpha was the official first issue of it. Yeah,
Legion Quest leads into the event that creates Age of Apocalypse, and then X-Men Alpha is the introduction to it, and then it's all of the Excalibur spelled different. It's all the major X stories, all the major X comics with a slightly different name.
It was Astonishing X-Men. Gosh, I mean, there's so many different, and they all intertwine together.
You get in there, and they'll take stuff like a Cyclops, and now he's not a good guy. He's working for Apocalypse instead of fighting against him.
And he's missing an eye.
You got Wolverine missing an arm or missing a hand, but he's still Wolverine, but he's not missing a hand. He's got all Bruce Banner's on the moon and a human. It's just so. It's just one that you read one issue and, even it's like, oh, that's Bruce Banner. Or you might read it, see a name and not recognize it. And then an issue later you go, oh, crap, that's the Hulk.
Yeah.
Not that one, but that's what happened. It's like, wow, that is a completely different interpretation of that character.
Yeah.
And it was so good that it's like, okay, I got to get the next one. Okay, so the next one's happening in X Factor whatever. So you have to go buy that one, and then you bounce over to this one. It's just done so well.
Yeah, and for those listening, and again, spoilers, whatever. But this is one that if you are a comic book lover and you have not read the Age of Apocalypse series or event, you should, because I'm with Radis. It's the best thing I've ever read, even to this day, as far as comics go. But a little bit of history on it. So there's an event called Legion Quest, where Professor Xavier, the leader of the X-Men most of the time, he has a son, his name's Legion, and at this point, he's been in a coma for, we'll say a decade. Well, he wakes up out of his coma, and before he went into coma, you find out he has multiple personalities. There's a reason he's called Legion. And when he wakes up, all of the personalities have fused into one, which means because each individual personality has a power, so all those powers fused into one. So he essentially becomes probably the toughest or strongest mutant in the history of comics. It may actually be, because they've alluded to that many times before. Anyways,
I think there's one
Franklin.
current ones that leave, the
Franklin Richards
power that he sees. Yeah.
But it's also like the two of those, like they've never gone against each other, so who knows? Anyways, so he goes back in time, and his idea is, I'm going to kill Magneto before he becomes Magneto, because if I can do that, then my father's dream will come to reality. So he goes back into time to kill Magneto, but instead accidentally kills Xavier, who defends Magneto. Xavier is dead. Magneto adopts his whole mission to create equality, but in a Magneto style. And Apocalypse ends up taking over basically. He takes over all of North America, I think South America too, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
Works on Africa. I think Europe is it's like one of the only free-ish areas. Free. But yeah, and it just goes from there, and it's fantastic. And I'm going to just kind of piggyback. We can talk about this, but I mean, there's certain characters that I didn't really care about before. In previous comics, but then in this run, they impressed me. There's so many good stories. One of the stories I liked the most in that one, though, was the story of Banshee. Banshee in regular comics, he's kind of cool. He worked for Interpol. He has the power to use his vocal cords to do different things. He can, make people pass out. He can break down walls. He can do all kinds of cool stuff with it, with his voice. And they have used him in the movies, for those who want to reference, in X-Men First Class. In the Age of Apocalypse, he is a broken man, and he is terrified of his own shadow because of the things that he's seen. He basically has PTSD really bad. And there's a villain in this series called Abyss, which I don't think he was I've never heard of him in the main series. I think he was an Age of Apocalypse created one, or maybe a variation.
He wasn't. He didn't have a 616 counterpart at the time, I don't believe. But Abyss is connected to Nightcrawler.
Okay,
in the 616 continuity.
Okay, so but basically the Abyss has. It's hard to explain his ability, but basically he can bring people into a dark dimension within himself.
Yeah, he actually represents the dimension that Nightcrawler teleports through.
Yeah,
at least that was my understanding of it.
It's funky, but so he's in a sense, in some sense, he's kind of unstoppable, and it's hard to explain it. You'd have to kind of read it. But what Banshee does is he basically breaks out of his fear and dives headlong into the abyss. And the way they described it, like the screams that were coming out of the abyss, basically like terror and pain and agony and everything else. But it was so intense that it basically blew him up from the inside out. So he sacrificed himself in order to take out and this was one of the four horsemen at the time. That storyline was awesome. And it's like, wow, like Banshee was cool before. I mean, he was okay, but that made me really like him, even though it was kind of a throwaway situation, or, when they went back to the regular continuity, because everything did get resolved for the most part. He was still the same guy, but I respected him afterwards. It was just kind of neat. So Age of Apocalypse, read it, love it. And if you disagree, please let us know. So what do you got, Jeffy?
Well, part of the reason why I wanted to go last, because I knew both of you guys were going to bring up Age of Apocalypse.
And you're like, I like it too.
Well, it would probably be number 2, and I just wanted to kind of name some of the other crossovers that I've witnessed, just to represent. I'm not going to go too far into depth. Obviously, Inferno was one of the first major ones that I saw. I've heard about all the mutants, but I never really read up on it until years later. Yeah, Mutant Massacre. And then, of course, there's the Executioner song, which had major ramifications. And then I've always preferred the crossovers that had a pretty decent resolution. I got to read the Infinity Gauntlet when that first came out. That was really neat stuff. Another thanks to my brother on that one. One that I thought was incredibly dissatisfying was Operation Zero Tolerance. That story arc, the way that ended, the big bad's taken down by a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents showing up. Yay. But my favorite comics crossover thing would still be Batman No Man's Land. Whenever I play like a video game series, like a video game, or I love things where I'm like carving out my territory and I'm expanding my territory and taking away from others, which was exactly what kind of Batman No Man's Land was about. Gotham was cut off from the rest of the United States, and the Bat villains went out and carved out their own territories. Basically, factions rose up. The Gotham City Police Department was their own faction. Batman was his own faction, and then each villain had his own territory, and they kind of took back pieces of Gotham one by one. That's really how I like to play video games. I did that in the Godfather video game. I did that in Mad Max, and I did that in Romance of the Three Kingdoms.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that I just really liked about it, and that also had a very satisfying conclusion, unlike Operation Zero Tolerance. And on the flip side, guys, I'm just gonna toss this out there. My least favorite story arc in comics, and I'll never understand the love affair, is the Phoenix/Dark Phoenix Saga.
Agreed.
It's like, hey, let's go ahead and kill the franchise. That's what it did to the X-Men animated series. It was like the X-Men went from the 1990s to the late 70s, early. Like they went back because the style of comics, costume appearances, and just how they kind of ran things. It was like, even the way they designed the Phoenix, character was so last decade and a half, 2 decades ago, and it just didn't mesh very well with me. And as far as, in the current Marvel movies, it was another thing. I mean, I actually did like the representation of the Phoenix in the current Marvel movie in terms of it was just like another darker personality rather than like this cosmic force like it was represented in the comics.
You need to rewatch that movie.
Yeah, it's a cosmic force, brother. There's aliens and all kinds of stuff.
Opening sequence is them in space, and she saves astronauts from the Phoenix forces, and it hits them, and it goes into her.
Wait, are we talking about the movie right here?
We're talking about the newest movie.
Newest,
with Fassbender and all
the
them.
newest. I have not seen the newest.
Oh, you're talking about the one with Famke Janssen. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I'm sorry, guys.
No, you're
My
good.
bad.
Okay.
Again, I didn't see it because I don't care about the Phoenix.
Yeah.
I'll never care about the Phoenix.
Yeah.
Well, you said current X-Men movies, and that is the newest X-Men movie.
So
I forgot I existed. I'm sorry.
that's funny. No, here's my thing, and as far as the comics, I was not a fan because I didn't read it initially, but I went back and read it. Not a fan. In the cartoon, when it hit, not a fan. Like I liked a couple of the groups that they introduced because I actually like the Starjammers. I think they're kind of neat.
CR Imperial Guard.
Yeah,
cool.
They're cool. But as far as the Phoenix, I'm good. I can live my whole life and never see that again. But then I'm well, here's the thing. So the X-Men movie, the Bryan Singer X-Men movies, that initial series, the Fox ones,
struck by lightning.
Well, stop. So I appreciate the X-Men, X2. I appreciate what they were. When X3 hit, however, and they did the Dark Phoenix thing, that is where they failed, and that's where they lost that franchise part. As far as that goes.
Was it the Phoenix character though, or was it just how they?
It doesn't matter. Nobody knows how to write a storyline that's going to do it justice, and it's a stupid story anyways. Like it just is. It's dumb.
Well, in that movie, they definitely shoehorned that in. Like, it felt like they wrote that movie and they're like, okay, this is lacking something. Ooh, let's do Dark Phoenix in here. Well, it doesn't fit anything else that's going on. Oh, we'll just make it a crazy personality and then have her. And it's like, come on.
Let's have her kill Cyclops right in the beginning so that he can be in Superman as a bit part. Just saying.
That was on him though.
Oh,
that was completely on that actor's decision to go be Lois Lane's boyfriend, the husband, whatever he was in that movie for 15 minutes.
I thought the Dark Phoenix split personality thing was still a better angle than a cosmic entity.
Sure.
You talked about shoehorn before. That's like a mega shoehorn if they were going to go that route.
Yeah. Well, so we got that, and then more recently, they did it. I think the movie was called Dark Phoenix, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And I'm gonna probably sound like a hypocrite here. I have not seen it. And I've seen parts of it because I like comic book movies. I like the X-Men. I like what the newer X-Men movies did with, this is turning into a movie thing. I like what they did with a lot of the characters. But as soon as they revealed Dark Phoenix, I'm like, I'm out. And I never saw it. I won't do it. And it killed the franchise again. They're dead.
One thing I want to ask the listenership, okay, and I'm just tossing this out there, guys. This is not the first time I've complained about the Phoenix Saga, okay? And I think even my brother and a couple other guys over the years have always told me, well, the Phoenix Saga was one of the most successful sagas that comics has ever seen, and blah, blah, blah.
Don't care.
And you know what? That might have been true in 70 whatever or 81. But what I really want to know is invoking the Phoenix Saga in any modern interpretation. Well, hell, in the last 20 years, does that increase the health of the franchise? That's what I want to know.
It's always the last nail in the coffin. Or as far as the cinema, it's been somewhat of the last nail in the coffin. Even in the animated series, I mean, it did keep going. But the funny thing is, I stopped watching the animated series after that.
Yeah, I remember going through all the episodes for the Phoenix Saga.
Yeah.
And then it flipped to the Dark Phoenix Saga. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me.
Oh, I know.
Quick.
Yeah, done. Totally done.
Because I actually read the Dark Phoenix Saga in comics in the years afterwards, and actually the Dark Phoenix Saga episode was almost panel for panel what went on in the actual the show and the comic panels actually matched. You might have had like Rogue in place of Cyclops for some things that he did, or Beast in place of Nightcrawler for some things that happened in there. But this rehashing of the Phoenix Saga just really bugs me, and that's all I'm going to say on it.
So we can all agree that the Phoenix Saga is awful.
Well, I can agree on that, but I'm wondering, did we get it wrong? Does the listenership know something that we don't?
So here's the question, and we'll have some information posted on the podcast as far as where you can go to kind of give your opinions, ask questions, those kinds of things. So go ahead, listeners, if you like the Phoenix Saga, let us know. We will not judge you. Well, maybe a little bit. But honestly,
nobody cares about what Mad Marty thinks.
Nobody cares what any of us think. But I would just say go ahead and let us know if you do like it. Let us know why. Because maybe you can kind of give us a little bit better understanding of it. I mean, I'm not going to go into it now, but I heard a story on another podcast actually about Jar Jar Binks from Star Wars. Now, I'm not saying I like the character, but I can understand what his purpose is in the entire trilogy now because of the story. So just something we could talk about another day. But I might change my mind. Go ahead and try it.
Real quick, Matthew, you actually invoked something that kind of caught my interest for a second. Because you brought up Star Wars. Star Wars has got a lot of good expanded universe comics and things that is underrepresented. So let's talk a little bit about things that are underrepresented in comics. Some things that don't get necessarily enough love.
As far as like comics that never got the traction that they needed, or that I wish would have continued. Techno comics when they came out. They were written by excellent writers. I mean, you had Leonard Nimoy, Neil Gaiman, those guys. The Primordials were awesome. Mr. Hero was awesome. I mean, they had some very good titles, but it just didn't pick up. And then the whole thing, the whole company went under as far as that went. That's something that I feel was very underrated. What about you guys?
Well,
you brought it up, Mad Marty, so you answer.
Some things that don't get as much love in the grand scheme of things. The problem is a lot of the stuff that I did want to see get more love, like the Infinity Gauntlet and characters like the Punisher and Daredevil, have gotten more representation in recent years. So I think that studios have done better with that. Maybe if more effort was made to better represent obscure villainy, particularly in the DC comics, I think that could be a potentially highly lucrative avenue to go. Tell me something more about Star Sapphire, or
I won't buy that comic.
Well, who's that? God, the problem is the name of the villain gets obscured by me. So the real cool guy from Aquaman, the Black Manta guy.
Oh yeah.
Is it Black Manta?
Black Manta.
Yeah.
The guy with the big black helmet? Yeah, that's Black Manta.
That shoots lasers out of his eyes.
Yep. And fireballs out. Oh, wait a minute. No, that's a different guy.
I would, and they kind of, actually, I'll kind of backtrack a little bit because they did do Suicide Squad, and I mean,
see, that's a problem when you in this subject. That's what's rough, because I was into Dark Horse Comics. It's a fantastic company. Anyone that's into comics knows Dark Horse Comics, and they sell a lot of comics.
They do.
I don't think they get enough love. They don't get enough love in the non-comic mainstream media. They've had three attempts now at Hellboy, which I thought the Ron Perlmans were good.
I watched
the newest one, and it has potential. It has a post-credits scene try to set up. I just don't know if it did very well in money.
I like the actor who played him. I haven't seen it yet, though.
Yeah, it was decent. And again, they've got the Star Wars license, and they've got a couple other.
Well, they used to. It's Marvel again.
Yeah, it's Marvel now, but they had it for a long time. I just think that company doesn't get enough. I think they make poor decisions when they try to get outside of comics. Whether it's going out and doing a movie or a TV series, I just don't think there's anyone out there that's given them the proper medium and the proper attention that some of their IPs could really use.
They need a better agent.
Well, one thing that you brought up earlier too is you talked about Image earlier. There seems to be. I have a friend, my friend Hitavio, that does a lot of comic collecting. He does a lot of resale, so it's kind of exposed me back into the world of comics a little bit more of the vintage stuff. And you hear these collectors kind of walk by, and they talk about various series. Like every time that I've worked a booth with Ottavio for NSB Comics, I've probably seen like 3 or 4 individuals trying to collect the entire series of the New Mutants. Which, by the way, we don't know if that movie's ever going to come out.
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's coming out. They've re-released the new release date on it and put the trailers back out.
I heard they did some reshoots too to make it possibly mesh.
One thing that does not get a lot of love is the Image Comics. A guy came up and wanted to sell a bunch of Image Comics, and my buddy just really couldn't make a good offer on him, because there just wasn't a huge demand for the Image stuff. Yeah, it was really big in the early 90s, but it just, after the company just kind of fizzled out, it just kind of landed into obscurity. So, go ahead.
They sold their IPs to Wildstorm, and Wildstorm didn't do much with them, and then they kind of went under and pushed some stuff over to Vertigo, and Vertigo just let it die. So anything that came out of that early 90s Image, like I said, like a Grifter, who there's a couple of groups in there that were fantastic stories, but they just got crushed by DC and Marvel, and we just could not find a niche. And they tried to keep their production costs down, which ends up hurting storytelling because they can't get, the best story people.
The best artist, the best story, yeah.
Yeah. So
I think what's really tough about this particular subject that we've invoked is one of the challenges here is when it comes to seeing something new in comics, especially something that's maybe been hashed out in the past, what's going to make a successful franchise or a successful movie? The truth is you really don't know because there is a sincere lack of familiarity with the content that you don't know whether or not it could be represented in a way that would give it justice. And, that's one reason why I've been such a big fan of the DC animated universe is it brought a lot of that obscurity to light. So I guess what I'm looking for is I'm looking for that one medium that might do something that, might bring a character from obscurity into the mainstream, whether it be through comics, a TV show, an animated series, or feature film. What is the best way to bring, that obscure character to the light? Like that TV show Lucifer, I had no idea that thing was a DC character. Not a clue until I looked it up on Wikipedia one day. I mean, yeah, sure, it's kind of a fun show. It gets a little drawn out sometimes, but it's just kind of an example of, what's the best way to get that comic content out there.
Yeah.
So
final question on this topic. If you could have any 2 characters in any comic book get into a battle, who would they be? And don't tell me who you think the victor would be, because we're going to let our listeners decide.
So the ultimate, what you think would be the greatest comic fight between 2 characters?
Doesn't have to be the greatest, just a comic fight. Two characters you personally would like to see go against each other. And it could be more modern, because I know they've had crossovers and different things. Just,
I think
a more modern
rendition. Did the one that I would like to see in the comics.
What's that?
And that's Deadpool and Batman.
Okay. And what about you, Marty?
Well, go ahead and pit my 2 favorite supervillains against each other. Dr. Doom and Mr. Sinister.
That's a good one.
Over a 4-issue, 8-issue arc. It'd be
nice.
interesting to see what they would do.
Where essentially they're playing a game of chess. Like they're literally sitting across from each other playing a game of chess, and in their mind they're move, counter move on what they would do. That'd be fun. That'd be kind of cool. And then for me, and this is one that you guys have heard multiple times, and I'm not going to tell you what my opinion is, but Nightcrawler versus Superman. Because we're just going to leave it at that.
We'll just leave that on the table.
We'll leave it on the table. So listeners, if you would like to voice your opinions on these, that would be great. And we'll have more information on that. We'll have a Facebook page and an email. You can send it to us, which I will explain that after we are done giving out plugs. So that being said, what plugs do we got? Marty?
Well, since I invoked it today, I just want to give a plug out to my buddy Ottavio Escamilla and his NSB Comics. It's a local local realtor of nostalgia type items, from comic books to trading cards, and I don't know where he finds half the stuff, like Garbage Pail Kids and
All My Children cards.
Yeah, no kidding. But he's also represented through a store at called GQ Sports over at Cherryville Mall. Since the COVID thing is kind of opening up a little bit, they've had a little bit of store hours. So if you're local, if you're aware of Cherryville Mall, go ahead and give GQ Sports a look and see Tavio and Gary.
All right, Radis, what do you got? You got to have something. Plug a store.
Anything, I was gonna say I'll plug TSY, which is now Top Cut up there in Rockford for your comic addiction. Still a great store. I feel like I'm in Rockford, try to visit it. If you're more in the St. Louis area, there is the Fantasy Shop down here with multiple locations. They're a little bit more mainstream than Top Cut is, so they're a little tighter on their collections. But yeah, they're in Rockford, Top Cut. And if they can't get it, if they don't have it, they'll get it. And you never know. Walking in any comic book, you might go and be picking up an X-Men comic and see something that catches your eye, and all of a sudden opens your world up to a whole different story arc.
Sure. And then for me, as far as stores go, I will plug Cataclysm Games. I believe that is out in McChesney, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, I think I've seen this place recently. Do you know about where it's at?
I'll take you there. But it's Cataclysm Games. I believe it's McChesney, Illinois. I don't have the address or anything, but look it up. It is a fantastic place. They've got tons of board games, tons of miniatures. The people are super nice there. Just a really neat place to check out. I would have said Top Cut, but it was already plugged because I'll be going there tomorrow on Father's Day with my daughter, and we are going to buy a comic for her because that's my tradition with every holiday that we spend together. I get her a comic book. That being said, I'd also like to send a plug for the podcast Retro. I'm going to be talking about this every single time. It's a really good friend of ours, Raven Johnson, talking about retro topics of all different kinds. Really great guy and a really great podcast. And then Saturday Night Freak Show is another podcast that is by a gentleman named Colin, where they talk about they pick a movie, have 4 people kind of discuss it. They're all either professional film critics to some extent or amateur film critics, but they know their stuff, and they kind of give interesting takes on a lot of these movies. Some of them are vintage, some of them are newer, but great podcast to listen to. And then if anybody has anything else?
No, I'm good, man.
All right. Well, this has been another episode of the Game Files podcast. We appreciate you guys listening to us, and send us any ideas that you may have on our Facebook page and our email, which will be listed in the description. So you all have a good night and take care.
My name is Sinister. Mr. Sinister. Your whole lives, I've watched you, tracked you, studied you. You are the prototypes, the chosen ones. And from your offspring, I will control the future of all human creatures on Earth.